Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons & Dragons and how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. Hello, Hamilton. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hello, how are you?
I am good as well. We're back on our Eberron trails. We thought we'd go back and have a seeing because we were quite intrigued last time.
We were, yeah, I think so. I mean, I really found it, it's one of those things. It's like when you go and read these other, I remember like Ghost Walk, and you're like, what is this random thing? And you start reading it and you go, oh, there are clever, interesting, intelligent people out there who make really cool, interesting things. And I don't know why I'm surprised, but it's one of those things, really, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Where you're like, it's a really interesting, different take on D&D. I think it's just, you get inundated a little bit with D&D, and we have a bit recently felt, I think, a little bit lackluster on a couple of things. Not to like cast too many aspersions, but, the Vecna book wasn't the best. And you feel like it's all a little bit samey. And it's nice to then come up to something like, this is really exciting and new and adventurous and like...
And there's a lot of it, And
then there's a lot. Okay, there's a lot of it as well. But it's nice to have something that seems to be built with a lot of spirit behind it, and passion.
And, absolutely, yeah.
And it's quite nice and it's refreshing.
Yeah, I definitely felt that as well. And one thing I would say, because I think last week I was a bit down about like for example, the Dragonmarked houses, because I was comparing it naturally, and I'm going to compare it still to the Ravnica stuff. I'd be like, but in the Ravnica, you had all these guilds, and you would tell you like what things work there. I've since found out, because obviously I read more of the book. It does give you suggestions for where a paladin would fit or anything like that, but not necessarily in the Dragonmarked houses, but in like your group patrons, the different countries. So it's very fascinating, because I think the conclusion I came to after sort of reading this, mostly the second chapter, this is where we're sort of getting most of the information for this episode. We're looking at the Gazetteer and basically the geography and the faiths of Eberron as an overall. We're not going to go into too many deep dives, but taking away from it is that, you don't have to have a one-note story. You could be like, I like this world, but I like this part of it that might not include the Dragonmarked houses. That is like a unique aspect of Eberron. You don't ever have to get in contact with them. You could be in any one of these countries. You can be part of any of these countries that we're going to talk about today. The only thing that sort of connects them really, and the thing that is very hard to take out of Eberron, is this impact of the last war that came, and it's come to an end 2 years ago, and about people coming out and sort of adapting to a world that now has these magical inventions that were made for war, and having these, the Warforged and all that sort of thing. So how do you play a character in that kind of setting is not, and so I think my vision last week was very limited, because I was like, these Dragonmarked houses are cool, but I don't know where I'd fit in. And it goes, it kind of doesn't matter. That's not where your paladin or your rogue's going to fit in there. It's going to be about the countries instead. It's going to be about the faiths instead.
Yeah, because I feel like these countries are like settings in their own right, which is what in theory they should be. But I think, again, it's that whole sense of like being stuck in the Forgotten Realms, where you're like kind of focused in on the Sword Coast, which, no offense, but Baldur's Gate and Waterdeep aren't greatly different. They are like the difference between Chicago and New York. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, do you know what I mean? It's like,
I feel like Baldur's Gate is the Chicago for sure, because of maybe some mobster stuff. It's definitely a bit more gritty and grimy, perhaps, than Waterdeep, which is a bit more shiny, and then you got
Waterdeep's plan looks very much like New York, but I think it's just, it's not so, but it's more, I don't mean it like that, and no, casting no aspersions on the differences between Chicago and New York, but in terms of cultural differences, they are both in the same country, and they both have a similar, they have both got very tall towers, and they've all got the same sort of layout, makeup, politics and stuff like that to a certain extent. And that's what the Sword Coast feels a little bit like. Okay, you sometimes get chucked up to the 10 towns, which is just a bit cold. And then, exactly. But then in this, it's like, okay, here you've got super elven, crazy magic land. Here you've got weird, creepy place that's now covered with face-writhing mist. You've got Breland, which is very classic fantasy. Oh, but by the way, it's also got like mini Coruscant in it. Then you've got like a country that's run by hags. You've got a country run by undead. You've got dinosaur roaming place, and you're just like, wow, every single one of these is a banger. Do you know what I mean?
If you get on the lightning rail in Breland and go over to Drome, for example, you're going to notice the difference. So you're going to have culture shock. Is what you're sort of saying. Whereas I agree, if you're going the King's Road in the Forgotten Realms, it might not feel very different unless you're getting on a boat to Chult or something like that. Here here in Eberron, there's definitely an encouragement for you to go and move to different countries. Like of course, like there is, like we said this last week, that in Eberron, the book itself, the most recent book, we're talking about the 5th edition book here, there is an adventure that's set in Sharn. And yes, okay, so we'll come on to Sharn at another point. We're not going to cover too much of that, but that, there is a city, one of the most famous cities in Eberron there. But it feels like it's encouraging you, like, here's your world, you can go wherever you want. Whereas I feel like previously, the previous adventures and stuff like that, it was always connected to like small villages or distinct area, not necessarily jumping countries, maybe jumping planes of existence, but that's like, you almost miss that bit in the middle where you go from like national travel. You don't do international, you do like multi-space travel, you don't do the international get on a boat somewhere else necessarily. Like, again, that's a very simplistic view of it, but I agree. For me, it was like, we could start anywhere, whereas maybe in some of the previous stuff we've looked at, we're like, oh, we have to start here, maybe.
Yes. It's definitely much more sandboxy in that sense, rather than other stories. I know maybe it's also the fact that we've lamented this a number of times, there's not been a Forgotten Realms primer to the whole world of the Forgotten Realms. We've only had the Sword Coast one. And so, that's maybe a bit of it. But like, even when we've been looking at the Wayfinder's Guide to whatever the other one, the Wayfarer's Guide to Wildmount, that's very
Explorer's
much...
Guide. Sorry, yeah, Explorer's Guide.
Yeah, same thing.
Same thing.
In that as well, it's very much like there's two really major areas, and that's about it. And Tal'Dorei Reborn, I think was actually pretty good. Actually, Tal'Dorei Reborn had quite a little bit more, but still,
those Tal'Dorei and Wildmount, they are nations, they are continents in the bigger world, right? Whereas here in Eberron, the Eberron book, it covers Khorvaire, that's the main continent where everything's from, and then you have these other separate continents that you could also go to, but they're not the main feature of the book.
Well,
so this is like a proper world setting, which I don't think you and I have actually covered before in DM's book club.
No, I don't think so.
We've done like Dark Sun and all that, but this is like, I don't know, this feels so different because there's so much to it.
Yeah.
I think we're going into this prefacing by going, we know it is overwhelming. We found it overwhelming ourselves reading it through, but in a good way, in the fact like, oh gosh, where would we start? It's like a beautiful buffet of choice. We could keep going back for more, but then be overwhelmed and go into a food coma, that sort of thing. I guess I want to labor the point that this is definitely, it feels like a massive passion project, which obviously we know it is, but everyone's on board. But I think other than our sort of misgivings about certain things earlier last week, talking about the different races connected to the dragonmarked houses, again, that we'll just put that to one side because that's maybe something that I'm biased about. Here, I'm just like, wow, you didn't have to have the dragonmarked houses at all. You could literally just use the Eberron, Khorvaire, Gazetteer, use that as a template for your own worlds and just change some names and stuff like that. It feels baked in.
100%.
So that what we're going to look at today, the Khorvaire Gazetteer, the sort of the main section is, it talks about the 17 nations of Khorvaire, which, as I said, is the main continent. We might look at the other continents as well as sort of a brief reference to, but the 17 ones, those are the ones that are sort of mainly mentioned, and maybe the ones that you and your players will play go to and a bit explore, because it's all on the same continent. But as you were saying before, all of them are so wildly different because of this impact of the last war and people grabbing for power, new nations rising that aren't necessarily recognized by the Treaty of Thronehold. Like, in my head, this is the Game of Thrones.
Yes.
It's Game of Thrones, but not grimy. It's not backstabbing. It's just tense. It's like a cold war is happening again. So there's definitely a fear that another war may happen and another day of mourning might happen. Like what happened to Syria could happen to any other nation, and who's going to do it? Who is it going to happen again?
Yeah, and as a lot of that, like every single nation has that undertone in it. Like there's always a bit when we go through them of like, who are they aligned with? Who are they already rivals with? Like even in the first one, we're going to hear about Irondair and Thrain and their battle rivalry, and how little tensions you can already see that you could be flaring up in your campaigns as part of it, which is kind of interesting. They've also got in that, so when we come to it, there's Reaches as well, and their relationship to Irondair and how they see them as a rebellious sort of and not even see them as an actual nation, a renegade nation. So it's very, as you said, that Cold War sense is just peppered through the whole of this bit, even then, and you already feel like, well, that's already given me a campaign. There's just two nations that are already, or three nations involved in this this thing in this one area, let alone the other 60, that we've got to deal with.
Yeah, and again, just to preface this, because I'm aware that in the world right now, there's obviously lots of conflict and lots of land being taken and that conflict about that. So again, your mileage may vary on what kind of stories you would like to tell, but I do think these are a good template to even just looking over. So I will say that each of the 17 nations have a little bit of a brief description of what they are, interesting things about them, which is a little section which I think is quite nice. There's here's something you would know if you were about to visit. Again, a little primer on that front. What your characters might, what sort of traits they might have if they were living here.
Yeah,
something that that's come from travel book clubs. There's some sites and some cities for each one, depending on how many. Again, little snippets. If you're we need to go here, I need a stopping off point. We'll go here, and then I can expand it out next session. And then I think the most important bit is the aftermath of the last war, and this is what you were saying before about we're not aligned with these people anymore because of something they did, and it's just knowing the sort of interrelationships between them. It's a bit, again, I'm going to say Ravnica again. Ravnica was we don't like these people, they're our enemies because of something, here are our allies and stuff like that. But this is obviously on a much grander political stage, which I do think it's kind of important. It's one of those things where I can see a criticism could be why would my players care about this? They're, they are small cogs in a big machine. But I feel like in this particular setting, you could be playing those grand heist adventures. You could be sent out, one of the patrons is a government, is noble and all that sort of thing that you could be. So yeah, this could really play into your story. And I think something that would make a really memorable story, as long as it's not too lore dumpy, lore heavy.
Yes.
Is this something we said last week, is that would I encourage players to read this before we start a campaign or make a primer myself? I would definitely recommend to read the book, because I don't think there's any secrets that I could tell.
Yeah.
But I want them to be excited before they go, oh no, another nation that we don't know anything about, even though maybe they do,
I feel like it's the sort of book that it depends on your players as ever, but to me it would be sit down with them and say, we're going to do Eberron. If you're trying to get people, if they want to do Eberron in the first place, you think they might like it. But even in that, be okay, so you've got this one, A&R. It's France meets magic. You kind of give some simple four notes things that you could say about them. Breland, it's classic fantasy, but it's got this cool city. You got Khorvaire, and do those things and just go through them and go which ones do you like the sound of? What do you want me to talk to you about more? Oh, I really tell me more about the demon waste. Okay, here you go. And then kind of go through it, that maybe just working together through it rather than being here's the book. Because if I got this book as a player, I'd be okay. All right, I'll see you in a month or two.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I know we'll go on to stuff like this, but if you were going to run an Eberron campaign, for me, I can imagine, rather than saying, oh, I want to be a paladin, I want to be this, giving these 17 nations, because it says here are your characters from these countries are a little bit like this, and giving them to the players and saying, start from the countries first and then build up your characters, because some countries, as you were saying, they're more magical, they're they create the most mage rights and spellcasters, that sort of thing, so maybe that's where it comes from. And I think that's the thing for me, we talked about this before, tying players into the setting. And I think here it's not about what class you're playing or anything like that. Get excited about which country you're playing or which part,
Well, because it's so fundamental to it. Because, as we said, again, mileage might vary, but war is at the center of this story, the memory of war.
Yes.
And so your relationship to that comes from the sort of what nation and where you are or where you're located and how you interacted with that war and what the people around you's relationship to the war is. And so it feels kind of the way that you would come into this story is where are you from? Or are you from nowhere? Are you not? I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be aligned to those places either. No. It doesn't mean that just because you're in that nation doesn't mean you're aligned to it. But how were you affected by it? And where were you situated? I think could be, are you someone from this place but was in that place? Do you know what I mean? You're a Cubaran who grown up most of the time in Syria and now has been moved on again somewhere else or gone back to Khorvaire or is finding their way in one of the Syrian sort of areas they've got. So yeah, I totally agree. Is what I'm saying. I think that makes so much sense.
Because the other thing as well, which maybe it's only because I found out by looking around it and doing some research with this. Because I will say, D&D Beyond, the YouTube channel Wizards did. There's some cracking intro videos that they always do. I would recommend checking out the ones with Eberron because it does talk. Keith Baker also talks about it as well, which is quite nice to hear his voice do it. What I got from those videos was, and this is something I didn't realize, is that Eberron itself, and the whole plains around it's self-contained. So it is very unlikely that you will be, say, in the Forgotten Realms or in Dragonlance, Kryn or anything like that, and then you can fall through a portal and then you're in Eberron. It's all in the system. So I quite like that. So you can't be like, oh, can I bring this person from Kryn with all the Dragonlance stuff? It's completely separate. There are ways to get in and out, but they're very, very rare. And I quite like that. So that, as you said, you have to engage with the plot to how much or little, but you can't be an alien, so to speak, that you can't just be like, boom, I'm from a different, complete multiverse. It is self-contained in that way, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
I agree with that. And I think the only way that you could, the only way I could see like a potential of that is like, I'm from Zendrick. I'm from one of these non-warring nations that has come in. And that's the only way that if you really didn't want to do that and you wanted to be the sort of, as you said, the sort of outside eye, then there is that way. But I agree that, it's less. And I did say I listened to that Exploring Eberron, the little thing about Exploring Eberron. And in that, it has its own complete planescape to it. And it's in a crystal spikins in Spelljammer. So you could Spelljammer potentially here. But I think you're right. I think if you're coming to this, you come to engage with the story itself. And it feels, not that, but I don't think but we'll come on to it because I think we'll find that there's so much to each of these nations that you don't even have to deal with the war because there's so much else going on in some of them.
But one thing we mentioned last week was that, going back to that distinct flavor, distinct voices we hear from the and why it makes it so different. And I think they've done it in an incredibly clever way. I mean, maybe it's not an unusual way, but it's something that I didn't expect for. Maybe Ravnica had it as well. But they had newspapers, and we talked about this last week. They had examples of like the voice of Brellan and all that sort of thing. Not Kerrang, that's a different newspaper. But you know what I mean, like the Quran Chronicle. Also,
the Corenberg Chronicle.
The Corenberg Chronicle, which each of them had their very different, distinct voices. Some of them, let's say, a little bit more opiniony about others. Some of them doing think pieces, some of them reporting the news, and I really like that because instantly, I love the idea that no matter you get in a lightning roll, you get on a ship, you land in a new place, and you instantly pick up the newspaper, and there you go. And I think that, like I said last week, my thing would be to get the players to recap as if it was like a newspaper headline and a little article. And
I like that idea.
Sort of like we talked about the idea of like one of the patrons thing is being part of a newspaper. So that could be an interesting like story that you can do that is not necessarily like the typical traditional sort of adventuring thing. So I really like that you could get really distinct voices which we would relate to in a way because we read all these newspapers. There's the BuzzFeed-esque type one. I can imagine that coming up.
10 things you should know about the Mournland, but the fourth one you will be shocked by.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it. I think that will be quite fun. Like it's something that we can easily just pick up on, going, yes, that's part of our daily lives and stuff like that. So the idea of newspaper stuff like that being a way to that's your story hook, that's your thing, and a reason why you would move around maybe the different countries, but also just a way to get a good taste of what is going on from their point of view, their perspective, because obviously some of these are propaganda machines and all that sort of thing. So that's one thing I definitely would recommend to people. I know sometimes I'm the same, where I don't necessarily read the examples or the play examples. I would recommend reading the newspaper stuff, even just one or two, and you get a real difference between them. And I just thought those were quite a neat little flavoursome thing that certainly in the book to describe the different countries' point of view.
I just really I like the idea of an investigative journalist campaign. I think that's really fun. Like that's such a good backbone to a storyline of just like you just seek out. You're like you're like a band of investigative journalists, and you're doing a Watergate papers thing. You're
doing your own OGL investigation or your Channel 4 dispatches. You know what I mean? So
exactly. Yeah. I want to do it, but one of them's like Louis Theroux.
Oh my god, could you imagine? Yeah, there's someone that has to be the face, which is possibly a bard character, and then everyone else is just like watching this person constantly go through more and more awkward conversations with people. Who, you're like, it's that it is the Louis Theroux weird weekends, but in Brelon or in Carnoth, Kubaran.
Oh
amazing.
My gosh, I now want to make a YouTube series of Louis Theroux's weird weekend in Waterdeep.
Yeah, so shall we head straight into then the 5 nations? So why are we only looking at the 5 nations out of the 17 that is on offer to us today?
Oh, well, because there's a lot of them, I think is one reason.
Yes.
The nations of Galifar, which actually span most of Khorvaire, and that is the area that was the 5 nations which irreparably divided on the death of Galifar. So Galifar was this leader who was the sovereign and united the kingdoms all together, but obviously after he died, there was a whole war of succession. No one could decide, and everyone split, and that's how the war started. So the 5 key nations of that original, which were led by the different children of Galifar, are what are the ones we're going to be kind of focusing on today. That's that. And then obviously sort of the other nations are sort of secondaries.
Secondaries that have sort of broken away, and as you said, some of them have like become independent or risen up in the last 100 years or so. So there is tensions on that front. But yeah, today we're going to look at primarily Order, Brelon, Carnoth, Thrain, and Ciri, which we mentioned briefly last week. Should we go in alphabetical order? Make it easier?
That's the easiest way, isn't it? Yeah.
All right. Order. You could describe it as France meets magic, which I think is great. I mean, to be fair, again, something I mentioned before is that in these little sections, it gives like sort of things that people are famous for and hallmarks, etc. I like it. The first thing on this list is cheese, which I'm like, great. Yeah. I would absolutely mention that at every single point if they came to this place. I was like, there's a cheese cellar, there's a cheese festival, all that sort of thing. I would just put that out there. So I love that idea.
Yeah.
Education, fashion, grains, wine, and wizardry. So yeah, wine and wizardry is the sort of theme.
Yes. France and magic, wine and wizardry. I really like this idea of the floating towers of Arcanix, which is the key study point of magic, which is this really, and there's a beautiful little piece of art with these very sort of French-like style, sort of like minaret towers that are floating above, and they're kind of like on rocks, which are like Howl's Moving Castle kind of feel. It's very cool. I do love the styling of it. It talks about, how that every day is imbued with magic. If you could do something with magic, you'll do it with magic. Like why use your hand when you could use mage hand?
Yeah,
it says.
Exactly.
Why strain your muscles tugging on a bowstring when you could just use a wand? It's like you so get it. It's very. Yeah, you can imagine the characters already with this, and everyone's going to have some magic. And it says, show some style. Don't settle for common clothes as a squalid meal when you can wear glamour weave, which we talked about last week, and drink the finest wine. If you're a fighter, focus on finesse instead of crude strength, and never miss an opportunity for a clever quip. And you're like, I've got this character down. I know this character now. It's going to be very much.
It does feel a little bit Lord Flashheart-esque, doesn't it?
Yes.
You look incredible. Maybe not as arrogant, I don't know, but it's just like, oh, what a swell guy, what a swell gal. That sort of
not so brash, just but very like elegant and wearing amazing things. Oh, darling, and just like, I'll just grab that for you, and pulling, like using your magic to just weave something. Or I've got a bit of a breeze, bit of thaumaturgy to just like blow a little soft breeze on my neck or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely get the vision of European culture, and just double kissing on each cheek, French kissing on each cheek. That's like exactly what it's. Yeah, I get that feeling.
But when they do, little kiss hearts flow off their lips.
The magic on the lipstick or something. It's just like little emojis. Yeah. Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
but like this idea again of like a magical school-esque sort of thing. So, for example, if you wanted to play Strixhaven or put Strixhaven in here a little bit, maybe you want to do like again, I know I talked about it being contained a little bit, but like I like the idea that you are a specialist, that you've been transferred to Strixhaven, but you did a year outside in this particular, the most magical place in Eberron. This is the place where most mage rights come from. It is well known for its speciality in, like you said, creating magic users, because magic is just everywhere. It just helps you. People just don't, they're like, we'll just use it. Like you said, the mage hand thing. I can imagine unseen servants are just everywhere as a result. Like your shopping is being carried like behind you, a floating Tensor's floating disc, all that sort of thing.
Yes.
It's just a common sight.
That would be the fun of the campaign as well, as like thinking of those things as a character of like, how can I use magic in the most mundane way? Yeah.
I can imagine like a dimension door, but you just put your hand through to the fridge and that sort of thing. Like, I mean, that's a waste of a high level magic spell, but that's the kind of thing where it's maybe not laziness, but it's just like, why would I get up and walk downstairs when I could just do a quick sort of portal here, portal there? So
love it. So Arcanix is the place that we mentioned with the floating towers of wizardry, which serve to this. Also Arcane Congress, which is the research facility as well, and that also talks about like what kind of magic they can conduct. But then you've also got there's skip one and they'll go to Passage, because Passage is quite a little bit easier in the sense that it's part House Orion, which is the dragonmarked house, which deals with the lightning rail. This is where their like home is. This is where you get the production and maintenance of all those facilities. So I think that's kind of cool, and it kind of then fits with like, well, that makes sense. These are the arcane mage rights are from here, so that makes sense. So they'd be the place where this incredible machinery is made, and so I love that. And I feel like there's a good like I got too drunk, fell asleep on the lightning rail and woke up in Passage. Oh no, not and there's a whole department where they've just got these people who end up at Passage like, come on,
you're gonna have to get the long caravan back,
If you're too far away, they'll like teleport you for a fee back to where you're meant to be.
Very expensive.
And then you've got a Fairhaven, which is kind of interesting as well. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So this is the capital of Order, and it is one of the most beautiful cities in Eberron. It's stunning displays of just magical light and arcane wonders enhance the exquisite architecture. So instantly in my head, I don't know about you, I just imagined Disneyland Paris.
Yes.
Just constantly with the light shows and stuff like that. I know that's such a weird reference, but I know it's not like that at all, but I'm just thinking like they're just beautiful, like I imagine it is like the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, and people are bonjouring to you as you're walking down the street. It's like, oh, darling, you look amazing. That sort of like, I know, Disney-esque feel. Maybe I've misread the mark on that completely, but that's how I feel about it. Fairhaven is also the seat of the University of Wynon, a prestigious institution that draws students from across Khorvaire. As a noble entertainer or sage, you might have roots in the City of Lights. Yeah, the City of Lights. It's just a beautiful place to be. It doesn't necessarily say what else is a part of it, and that, again, all these cities and stuff are just like little hints of where you could be, little things like, oh, so here's the start, what else could be here, that sort of thing. So it's a nice little capital. Yeah. The other one that he mentions is Stormhome, which is the seat of House Lyranda, which is the ships, the airships that sort of go around. So, and it's this idea of storms. Just be like, it's delayed again, another 10 minutes before the airship can come in and dock and all that sort of thing. That's what I imagine.
Yeah, but it says that they're always constantly like, it should be storm blasted around it. But then when you get to the island, it's beautiful temperate island. It's a holiday vacation spot because they're magic, because Lyranda have this magic to control the storms. And again, this Order is not only the home to the lightning rail, it's also home to the people who created the airships as well. So it's like, it's the heartland of transport. And sort of like, so it's quite interesting.
I will say the one thing that stood out to me for the aftermath section of Order, is that it was badly affected in the last war by magic. Like, magic itself has the cities and stuff like that, they've been repaired and they look good as new. Just like, if anything, like in cities in the UK after the bombing of Second World War, they're repaired to look pretty okay. But then on the countrysides, they're still scarred by the magic sort of like that has affected this land. And like one example which I loved, you were like, this is a Fiona thing, is these crying fields. This idea that they're haunted by restless spirits. And apparently they claim that there is like there's noises in the fields or something like that. There's like spirits and stuff crying out, which I was like, oh, pretty good. I like that sort of stuff. So there's like an idea that now after the war has happened that Order is like stronger than ever, but there's mixed feelings about it because they lost, like you said, they were sort of the rivals with Thrain, which we'll come on to. And there's just this loss of this particular city that Thrain has just now, and the claim to the throne is just like it feels like we are united, but there's still some sort of murmurings of like, I don't think we are, and unease. I think here is unease. There's a brave sort of nationalist sort of face to it, but there's definitely not everyone's convinced by it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's got, as I said when we talked at the beginning, there's 4 paragraphs just on the aftermath of the war, whilst each of these cities get one each. And there's a lot going on here and a lot that you could interface with, and just to be a part, if you want to make it a part of your campaign. And I think it's interesting because now the whole Silver Flame comes up a bit then with that relationship between Thrain and Aundir. So we'll come on to that a bit probably when we come to that. But it's, and the Eldine reaches as well.
Yes.
Which is another area, which is like a whole thing about like taxes and stuff, which just makes me think of like, well, it takes me back to my American independence times where there's like how they seceded because of the high taxes and all those sorts of things. It just reminded me of that. That was when I did that at school for history. So that was the first one. It's an interesting one. But again, I think it gives a good example. That's pretty much all the information you get, but it's enough to be like, I can see where I'm going here.
Yes.
DM, GM can come in and add to that and build upon a lot of different things.
I think the only thing I would say would be possibly useful to have, because again, Ravnica had it, is having some notable NPCs mentioned or named in some way.
Yes.
Like, again, not in too much detail, because again, people change and all that stuff, but I think with the guilds and stuff, we had like, and the same with the Dragonmarked houses, we had here's the leaders and a little bit of personality. I think because we've got who's the leader of this nation and have a bit more about them, even if it's 1 or 2 like lines. Because obviously it has Order had the Queen, what was her name
Queen
now?
Aurala's.
So she has a claim to the throne. And also Ciri gets a bit more of a mention about their leader because obviously he's now the leader of a nation that no longer exists. So I think that's the only thing I would say was that I would like a little section of be like, who's the main leader and what, one thing that's what people see and one secret that people might not see or something behind the scenes is the only thing I'd say on that. But otherwise, you're right. I think there's enough for us to really pick out and go on. And especially with the link to the Dragonmarked houses for Order as well. We're like, they're important for here. And if our team is like, we're not interested in the Dragonmarked houses, so okay, maybe not Order to start with them, but they might go later on or something like that. All right, let's talk about Brellan then. This is where you would probably, I think, start an Eberron campaign, just because Sharn is in there. It's not the capital, which I was like, why is it not the capital? But maybe there's maybe something later on that explains why. The hallmarks of Brellan is espionage, which is always a good one as an export, isn't it? Industry, metalwork, organized crime, and subterfuge. It is one of the most powerful nations in Khorvaire since the ending of the last war. A large population, lots of resources, leads the continent in industry. So again, I can imagine like there's always building work. There's always builders everywhere. That things are building higher, further out, etc. in whatever city you go to.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one in this balance between the overly organized, but also espionage and organized crime and the sort of subterfuge thing. And I think when you're talking about Sharn, I feel like Sharn is like this New York. New York is like the most famous city in America, but it's not the capital. But it's like clearly like the capital of everything else internationally, like it is like this heart of American, exceptionalism is sort of exceptionalized in New York, isn't it? Sort of thing.
Well, most people would obviously, if they were emigrating on boats and stuff like that, they would go in via New York and the Statue of Liberty and stuff like that. So that it is that American dream. It makes sense. You would associate it with that sort of version of New York. And then, same thing here, I think, with Sharn. Absolutely.
It's an interesting one. And it's like, it's very interesting. It's got a very like populist idea behind it, like everyone seems to be very as in the king is very popular leader and celebrated, and but there's also this growing movement that says advocating for abandoning royal rule when this king passes. So there's a bit of tension there that you could play with, which I think is really interesting. But the characters bit is the fun one, because it's like I'm going to go in reverse order because I think it's more fun. So you got practical. So it's like whether about fashion, food, or conversation. So it's like, you're going to just spend what you have, spend wisely. If you're going out as an adventurer, if you and an Ondare are together, the Ondanian's going to be like, oh, darling, gorgeous, stay in this lovely
drinks
and
for
you're just
everyone.
like, exactly. and the other one's going to be like, I bought a water and it's going to be that.
I didn't have a dessert.
Yeah, exactly. But then, and like innovative and independent, so you find your own path. You don't follow established traditions, so you're a little bit on the edges of like that sort of thing. And you'd be but then also looking for new things. But then the third one, slightly shady.
I love it. I love that. Not as trustworthy. Like you're like, I'm a nice guy, and you're like, yeah. You're a penny pinching.
Yeah.
Like we just follow the strange path. Honest, I know the way. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Connections or friends in low places.
Yeah. This loose relationship with the law. Brilliant. I love that. And it totally makes sense for the way that Brelon has been sort of put out there. And interestingly, that obviously, like you sort of mentioned, these other major cities that are in Brelon, they are described as highly cosmopolitan due to its proximity with Drome. So we talked about before, that's the country that is headed up by 3 hags, and that's more of a monstrous country in the sense of like that more monstrous inhabitants and stuff. These cities will include more monsters, so there's a little bit more sort of like maybe tension perhaps because of what's happening with Drome, etc. But you're more likely to see, say, bugbears walking down a street, and it's not a shock or a surprise, where maybe in Khorvaire it would be, I liked how those 2 big nations, I think Khorvaire and Brelon, they're the sort of main 2 I can imagine, like as a well, I mean there's 5 of them, I know, but those are the 2 main ones where I think I would either all start in one of them compared to the other 3 that we've got going on, personally speaking.
Totally agree. The sites and cities of it are equally interesting. We've already mentioned Sharn, and we'll do that in more detail because there's so much going on in there. It's clearly it's the sort of capital of the world in a sense, in that what we were talking about. You've got Argonth, which is the floating fortress of Breland. It's a product which is made of the House Cannith, which we talked about, and it's like this huge floating moving city. And there's an image of it later, which is really cool.
Like a big engine of war. Like,
and you could it's like Mortal Engines, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
So that's Argonth. And then there's the Black Pit, which is kind of cool. Which is like a massive chasm.
Yeah.
And it's said to be the entrance of the abyss. It gives me that very much, Black Pit is a thing in Mordheim. And so Mordheim, and it's like this city outside Mordheim. It's called Black Pit, but also this one is like a home for deserters and other criminals. There's a thriving black market who sit on the edge of this chasm, and it's a good place to like disappear and like go get things and stuff like that, which I think is kind of cool.
But again, isn't that a great like one-off adventure that you could just do and just be like, people are going missing near the Black Pit, and go to the village and be like, oh, we don't take kindly to you kind of folks, and you're like, I instantly like folk horror right there with the Black Pit. So people go to disappear, whether it is folk horror or whether it is like people just disappear to just go into a different, if they're going undercover or trying to change their shape people,
make some shady deals with some people who can maybe help them get what they need to get, sort of thing. So I think that could be interesting. Like I want to try and take down the king. Let's do that. And then new Ciri, which is kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, new Ciri or Cyr. I mean, to be fair, as I've listened to many things, and one thing I should have pointed out at the beginning, Keith Baker does not mind how you pronounce any of these names.
Oh, great.
Don't panic. He said that, he believes it is Ciri, but he's heard Cyr, Syra. It doesn't matter with these sort of things. As as whatever it is, as long as you are happy with it, that is fine. And I'm just like, hooray! I just wish it was in writing. And I'm always a big fan of pronunciation, guys, just to help people. But this new Cyr or Ciri is basically the refugee nation, the camp after Ciri was decimated, frankly, on the Day of Mourning, where no one can get in or out now because of this huge sort of mist that changes things, and there's things in the mist. Most of them have been refugees, and a lot of them are in this sort of refugee sort of camp now into a sort of struggling town called New Ciri. And so that's where the bulk of Ciri refugees are. But that doesn't mean to say that you are tied to that. You can be anywhere across things. You've just been completely displaced. And of course, stories about being displaced and trying to find your way and trying to refit yourself into a world where your past, your country where you came from no longer exists is an incredibly powerful story, as long as it's treated sensitively, and obviously lines and veils and all that sort of thing. Again, this is something where you could, I think, easily, and we'll go on to Ciri obviously in a second, but it would be interesting to have all of you from Syria, if you're an adventuring party, or none of you, or just one of you. I think, but again, as long as everyone is on board with that story being told and being told sensitively, then that's okay. And especially when it comes to stuff, it is taking direct references from refugee camps, shanty towns, that sort of thing. So it is going to be a grim experience. They've lost their hometown, home worlds.
It's not going to be an excitingly fun story, but it's definitely an interesting one to take on board if you want to.
Exactly.
And I think if you're going to be investigating the Mournland, it's something you're going to probably have to interface with, in some respects, because that's part of it. And I mean, you don't have to, obviously, but it feels like it's something that you would make note of, I think.
It's summarised, like you said, in this last sentence here. It says, New Syria remains a symbol of hope for many refugees. It's also the last stop for those determined to explore the Mournlands. I think that summarises that. Like, it's hard. It's a hard life.
Yeah.
You've lost everything. But it's not miserable. It's not like a big downward spiral. It could be, but there's a hope of we'll be back. We'll put the lands to rights, etc. But as you said, this is a place you probably would stop for information stuff just before you go to the Mournlands, because that's where a wealth of the information and resources probably would be about, taking first-hand experience from hearing people who have been displaced.
Or if it's like one of your campaigns is going to be like you've been hired by Prince Orgev to go into the Mournland to try and collect something or find out something.
But equally, as you were saying, like you don't have to stop there, because obviously you could have like a warlock patron who goes, I need you to go in, but subtly, don't let anyone else know. So I think I'm always a big fan of having places that are like, again, because it's just a paragraph or two about what New Syria is and not too much detail, which is fine. I do think it would be, I mean, maybe like you said, the Prince stuff comes a little later when we talk about Syria itself, but one or two more extra lines about the leadership here I think would be helpful if for whatever reason people go, actually we don't want to, I mean, it's very hard not to include what happened to Syria here.
But you don't have to have the refugee part of it, to be honest. It could be that it's all gone. Like, Syria's just gone.
Everyone who was part of Syria has just disappeared. There's been a rapture of some sort. Or
anyone who was outside of Syria, there's probably those few people, but apart from that, there's not even a number. It's just anyone who was outside of the city, the area at the time.
Yeah, there's just this mist. Anyone that goes in never comes back out and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it's a great way of putting it, actually. Yeah, so you can mitigate possibly that people died. We don't know is the thing on that. So I quite like that. The other two cities we've got, Thafarond, beset by armies from Thrain, Syria, and Karnath. These residents hold grudges against those foreign neighbours, understandably, because they had been besieged by various nations. However, attention of late has been focused on the moorlands itself. Nameless horrors have begun slipping into Breland from the east at an alarming rate. So there's armies stationed around this particular city just to contend with it and hold things back. So again, that could be a really interesting story about where you're doing your investigative journalism stuff that, we've heard of some nameless horrors, and then you experience basically an attack of some sort through things, through the mist, like that people get grabbed and pulled in and all that sort of thing late at night. That's sort of like the Thing-esque type thing. It's cold, it's dark, and no one can see anything. It's like, well, it could be one of you and all that sort of thing. Exactly. And then the final one is the capital of Breland itself, is Roat.
Weird name.
It's Wroat. Built on both sides of the Howling River at a point in which the river widens. This is the ancestral seat of the rulers of Breland. Seduces visitors with its tree-lined avenues, elegant drawbridges, cleanliness, and laid-back atmosphere.
It's like a restaurant review.
Come visit Roat. It's great here. Absence of beggars and riffraff in the street might also raise suspicion that Roat is putting on appearances. That idea of Breland being a little bit shady, going like, well, why is it so pretty? Why isn't there, it's very welcoming. Everyone's like, oh, come on, we're all great here. But then there's like these dark shadows and there's something going on behind closed doors. I love that as a little bit of an era, like a little bit of a sense, a vibe going on. Like, there's something's not quite right, but it doesn't really explain what it is.
A little bit of like, it's all a bit too clean here. It's all a bit too nice here. No one steps out of line. And Dave went missing. He said something he shouldn't have.
Feels like police state-esque, which again, you might not want to play up all the way to. But that idea that if you make a fuss, I imagine this is a place that not many protests happen, that sort of thing. And it could be, again, an interesting storyline to play with, as long as people are happy to play with that sort of thing. Again, I can imagine anything about police aggression or police states that it could be triggering for folks. But I do find that interesting as a, like, in comparison to what I normally say is like, there's nothing supernatural here. This is actually the government doing something. It is actually a realistic thing, which is very real.
Yeah, and then that's where you get that beautiful piece of art of Argon, which just is so cool. It's like a steam train beast floating city. It's very cool. I'd like to go there. It does the aftermath of the last war, where it talks about, Brellan fought Aundair, Ciri, Carnath, and Thrain all through the thing, as well as we talked about Drome and Dargan. As it says, these conflicts cause many Brellish to embrace a cynical view of the world, a sense that no one can be fully trusted and people need to look out for themselves. As a Brellish character, you can have an axe to grind, which I think it's something, again, it's like, if you want to go in, it's like you could build that as a sense of just more, that, it's all the locals thing you were talking about earlier. Maybe it's that sort of sense, particularly outside of the cities a bit, or something like that, where it's a bit more, you wouldn't feel maybe the welcome that you would have in other places, or it's something that you could just overcome by showing people that do want to do that, that do want to, within this, there's this feeling of it, but actually it's not really that true, or something like that.
Yeah.
On the flip side of this, to coin our phrase, they are also the nation that welcomed Syrian refugees to their place. So at the same time, they have this dichotomy of that. So you can play it however you want, really.
It feels like, yes, in certain parts of Breland, it does feel like neighbours may be reporting on neighbours. There's a little bit of paranoia which, again, if you want to play into that, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, then it's juxtaposed with this idea about we will save and look after Syria. But again, that could be a cynical thing of like, oh, well, they're just doing that because they want to look good, but also maybe find out from those particular refugees and then working in relation to what actually went on. Is there a way that they can claim back the moorlands and then put their own state? So it's all that second guessing, which I like. For this one, it permeates not only sort of the general view of like what we think of Breland, but even into the individuals of like we joked about it before by being slightly shady, going, no, you can't trust anyone. Everyone's out for number one, and I'm like, oh, but it's not like a 2D version of like, nah, you can't trust anyone. It feels like a genuine, like, I have to look after myself because one wrong word, I will disappear.
I was just thinking that maybe you lean harder into that sort of MacArthurism America, or like you go into like Cold War Eastern Germany sort of thing. Like there's no war going on, but there's this people saying, oh, they're a communist, or sort of thing, those sort of things in McCarthyism, or the sort of in like this neighbors not trusting each other, or is someone a spy? Are you a spy? Because one of the key factions in Breland is this, I've forgotten the name of them off the top of my head.
But, the Lanterns, right?
Yes, exactly, which is this spy network. And so it's obviously got that whole spy network. So if you want to lean into that sort of like Cold War, people sending missives to one another and stuff like that, maybe you could go down that route here. I don't know, like trying to find in the investigative journalism, like what's the secret behind the throne? What is the throne up to? Maybe that's what you're doing, and you're going in and you're meeting Deep Throat like this version of it in some place to like give you like, oh, the Lanterns have been taking people like this people, and actually it looks like it's this, and you could go down this route, or they've hidden this secret, or like they were the ones that caused the Mournland and we've got proof, that's the big thing, the big reveal or something like that.
There's a certain facade to it all. So I find it interesting, really interesting. And I'd say again, looking at those newspapers we saw about the voice of Breland, it's very much like, come see what we can do. Well, get the first point of news from the voice of Breland. Hurrah! It is very like that sort of like 1950s Newcaster sort of thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So lots to play around with, lots, like you said, lots of ways to customize it, and like you said, to lean into certain things depending on how your group is feeling about it. So really interesting.
So the next one is Ciri, which is now known as the Mournland in brackets, and then capital it says like Metro brackets destroyed. But its previous sort of hallmarks, it says, is art, artifice, jewelry, music, oratory, and philosophy. And it does say that, like, in the sort of primers of it, it's like it was this nation where you went for ultimate culture, cultural things of like music and, as it says, all those sorts of things. And it was also the home to this, the dominant face was the sovereign host one, gods of the earth sort of thing. So this kind of, you can imagine very arty, people sort of it's just very sort of like new agey in some respects. I feel I kind of get that vibe to it. And it sounds like it was like a really nice place. You know, it was like valued diversity, versatility, both in talents and thoughts. You could imagine it was this great nation of like real thinkers and debate and like a very modern
proper up and coming nation, but also the seat of the kings and queens of the rulers of the united Galifar. For this to happen to this country is shocking and devastating. You know, that's the thing you got to get across. Like this was literally I think possibly the linchpin that kept everything together. Syria was, and then got decimated on the day of mourning, and now everyone else is now scrabbling for being united under their own stuff, and they always would be. I think they always would have those identities, but here it's like such an impact. Like again, maybe there's a thing of like looking back on nostalgia. It was like, oh, but well, before the war, this is a Syrian made coat, and look how beautiful. You won't get stitching like that anymore, all that sort of thing. So maybe there's a nostalgic look there as well. But I think the way it writes about Syria, you're like, wow, this could be really like. I think as a GM, this is something that you have to get across to your players, like the fall of this place. I mean, devastating anyway because of the magical, like, what is this magic
nature of
the cataclysm of it, but also like it couldn't have. It would have been bad to happen to anyone, but the fact it happened to Syria, which was where the seat of power was, devastating.
And what culture have we lost? What have we lost as a world from this culture? I feel there's a big drive in my mind to like play a Syrian character in the sense of like and that process of like trying to find out what the Mournland issue is and trying to overcome it seems like a really easy motivator to make for a campaign, but it just seems very interesting. And it does mention this. It talks about like coming up with the characters, like what have you lost, like what beyond obviously the wealth, status, family or loved ones, but was it okay research? Do you have an artifact or a precious family relic that you're looking for? Like consider that impact it has on you. Are you a noble or a soldier? Are you someone high or low? Are you, it's like, how do you command yourself amongst your peers now in Syria? Like, how has it changed as well? It doesn't even mention that, but like, were you someone who was a commoner, but now all of you are at the same level? And so what's growing out of this is a new way in this Syrian culture of like, oh, we're all together. And so you found your position change.
What I found really interesting, so like as we said before, this is from the Syrian characters section. It's the only section out of all 17 nations that asks you, the player, what was Syria to you, rather than giving you, here's the free things. And I thought that was just really interesting because, again, tying you into that story, but like, because this is your homeland that you don't have access anymore. And it's just a thing for, it's that sort of thing where you give us some NPCs, give us some of your loved ones. Okay, cool. I take them away now from you, and that's your motivator sort of thing. So I liked how this was so different. Rather than telling you what you'd lost and telling you what motivates you and what you 100%. Hold on to, it's what you think. And I just thought that was I know it's such a small shift, but I noticed it and I was like, that's an easy way for people to get in if they wanted to, like you said, if they want to play out the story, rather than being told, you tell the GM and then they make it happen.
And the two sentences that really drive it home in the aftermath of the last wars, we're skipping a bit, is like, no nation won the last war, but Syria unquestionably lost it. Other nations are recovering, Syria is gone. It's like, that's what you've got to like, that's how you come to that. And it's like, how do you deal with that? Everyone else is getting better and trying to heal, and you can't heal because your country is still, it's not just destroyed, it's still an ongoing terror. It's still an ongoing, so it's like, it's a real headspace to, if you want to engage with that, to get into. And also as like a GM, being aware of like how your own biases and those things, like trying to build that up, like how to manage that as well. It's an interesting one. And it's, as we say, like we're talking mainly about the 5 main ones, and they do focus a lot more around this war. Whilst I just want to add this in, is that if you're not coming into this thing and you don't want to engage with the war as much, definitely the other 12 are much less they get further and further away and less involved with them. So I think it will give a bit of an impression through these 5, because they were the 5 key warring nations in it. So
that's kind of why I wanted to focus on these 5 for this episode, because I think it'd be very hard to play a campaign of Eberron without mentioning one of those 5 things, sort of thing on that, especially in Syria of all places as well. And then just to quickly mention, there are some sites and cities, although they're no longer exist, as you said, they've been destroyed, or they are hard to get to because of there's the fear of what happens when you go into the Moorland and these unnamed horrors and monstrosities and what occurred there. So we have Metrol, which was the capital, known as the Rising City, for many of its buildings stood up top soaring columns of rock that dared to scrape the heavens. So they get this amazing image of like being torn down. I can imagine this, whatever happened, just twisting and turning and pulling down these buildings of architecture. That's where, as you mentioned, the Cathedral of the Sovereign Host was the center of it. And the Sovereign Host, in case we haven't clarified, that is one of the main, if not the biggest religion in Eberron. Maybe we'll get a bit of time at the end of this episode to talk about religions and faiths. But that is something we can talk about in terms of like the campaign. If you're playing an Eberron campaign, faith does play a big part of it, but not in a way that everyone has to have religious connections or anything like that. It's just, it is a part that you have to consider, because it does play, as we'll go into with the other nations, does play quite a big political move as well as a religious agenda on that front as well. But
well, if we're ready to move on to Karnath, because that's a good segue into it, because that is fundamental to Karnath's sort of like governmental system and the way it's run. You know, so Karnath is the hallmarks are ale, dairy, glass, livestock, lumber, martial discipline, paper, textiles, and undead. And this is the one I thought, I like this one because it's all very like vampy and stuff like that. And I think I think Fiona would also.
I do like this one as well. Yeah,
yeah. Because the religion of the blood of Vol, which is I think is a really interesting take on religion in D&D. Particularly, it's very different for D&D, which is that it's the blood inside you is your soul. It's a physical manifestation of soul, and it's the power that you gain by being a cleric in the blood of Vol is literally through your inner self. And the way it talks about the religion is about, you know, the only way to find strength is inside you. And it fabulously works together with the whole, as a like conceptual idea. I don't know how much I agree with it, but like the whole conceptual idea of it works really well as a whole thing of like, they have this religion which is very much about themselves and inner strength and building strength from inside you, and that also goes together with a country that is. This is the one with the military service, so you have to do 2 years as the military service in this. It's definitely about discipline, of martial discipline, and like regimented and stuff like that. And on top of that, because blood is life and is soul, once you are dead, your soul. You have no blood. I was going to use the exsanguinated for a big word, and therefore undead creatures do not have any soul anymore. So there is no harm based in their religion to bringing them back to fight. And because of this military duty, it is an honor to be able to fight once again for your country, even in death. After death, the kind of thing. So there's it's a whole really well considered concept of the place. So how much of a like horrible sort of like, not horrible, you know, but like how much it sort of plays on many different edges of morality and stuff like that. Yeah. It's a very interesting concept, and I think they've worked it very well.
Yeah, because it doesn't, to me, instantly speak of like, oh, this is evil. Like sometimes when we've gone through other religions and faiths in D&D, there's definitely like, oh, this is definitely part of the chaotic evil. Like this is where you could ascribe it to. Now, I'm sure you could, depending on how you play it. But like I'm just reading from the section about the faiths of Blood of Vol, and they have these like sort of tenets at the top. So the one I like here is like, what just God will allow death and suffering? The Blood of Vol teaches that we all have the potential to become divine beings, and that death is a curse designed to kill you before you can unlock the divinity within you. And I'm like, whoa, like you said, it all comes from within and that sort of thing. And then this idea of this country, Karnath, they lack magic. They have the soldiers, they have the power, but in a war where suddenly you have magical artificers creating magical items to help things, they were sort of left behind. And that compared with food shortages and the impacts of war, they kind of were left in this choice where like either we can be destroyed, this is before obviously what happened to Ciri, or we can build up our armies by bringing back the dead and having this relationship with necromancy and stuff like that, which is what a great story. Great, because you're like, this is an extreme example of it, and I think you're right, it works. I think for this, certainly if you were going to start off with Karnath as your starting country, knowing about I think for this one and Thrain, which obviously we'll come on to, having a real sense of those particular religions that are, or faiths, that are powering the agendas. I think that's just something that as a player you should know, just to get to understand how serious that everyone looked down on this, saying this is not okay that you're bringing back the dead, because it goes against the sovereign host religion,
Exactly.
all that sort of thing about natural life and stuff.
And it does say that the current king, Caius, is broken ties with Blood of Vol, and in it mentions the sovereign host has regained its place as dominant religion. So there's this interesting dichotomy already within the nation of this change post-war, because they've even said that they thought that maybe even the famines and plagues were responsible, as a response to the use of all this undead moving about. But it says people might still use skeletons and zombies as guards or laborers. And so this is what an interesting place to sort of like completely different thing you would experience. And this mix of very military rule, like very strong, like military, like it says it's like a martial law is basically happening here. So you've got this dichotomy of like very strict rules, but also that bloke over there is just using a skeleton. Like, what the heck? It's very weird and very different. And I think a really interesting place.
On top of that, like you said, like the current leader's broken ties with the Blood of Vol.
Yeah.
But there are zealots, there are extremists, again, depending on what you want to play with. There is the Order of the Emerald Claw that will use the undead to get, to make a scene and a protest for the Blood of Vol, that sort of thing. That they are the most extreme view. But as a result, all their actions reflect badly on everyone else who is part of that faith, even if they're not going to those extreme levels. So again, if you decide that alongside, even if you are just say a fighter that's from Karnoth, ideally you should know about the faith, but maybe you are particularly religious, but you have to constantly clarify that no, I don't agree with what the Order of the Emerald Claw are doing, because those are conversations you could have. I think that's the thing I can imagine with this sort of campaign is the social aspect, those encounters and stuff, having to navigate obviously the political stuff, but then maybe also the religious stuff as somebody else comes across as someone who is a cleric of the sovereign host who just wants to have a conversation with those people who follow the Blood of Vol or the Silver Flame.
Yeah,
it's something I had not considered personally, because that's not something I'm always more about, like, okay, there is a to B, you get to B, but actually thinking about all these other things along the way could be just an interesting story.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. It doesn't matter about the actual overall mission. It could be about what the players do and how that plays out in terms of their relationships.
I think Eberron as a whole is opening us up to that a lot, it feels like all of these places. But then looking for like this is one of the few that I'm actually going to pick up on the little side notes story piece it has here, which is in the thrall of the Vampire King. So again, like these other things that you can just like pepper into there, is that there's like this story because the current king, Caius III, was hidden from society during his youth, and his aunt served as the regent. And he suddenly then just came to the throne at an adult age, and everyone went, he looks a lot like the last ruler, which is Caius I. And everyone thinks that he is some sort of undead vampire king that is just like, oh, he died, the Caius I. And he's been the warlord Drago Thrall, who I think is of Thronehold, has even said, like, challenged him, and he cut his hand to prove that he bled, but they're like, that's a lie, he's using magics, and he's like get him away from being able to walk in the sun, and he's faking it all.
Great, I love that. Like, the stuff even about the royal family ourselves in the UK, it's like and questions like even currently obviously with the US election as well, there's always questions about like where have they come from, what are they doing, and what's their record, and who are they come out of nowhere, and then their family members and all on top of that. So again, you can have a little bit of fun, leaning into these sorts of things should you wish to. So I really like that idea. But those newspapers going like, well, they look exactly like the things. Conspiracy much? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Well, it's like the Nicolas Cage. They found those like 1800s photos of people that look like Nicolas Cage. Like, he's a vampire. Yeah, it's like that.
Exactly. No, I like that. Yeah. The outrageous think pieces that clearly like
National Enquirer shit.
Yeah, it's like proper like scandal.
Now I want to do a National Enquirer themed investigative journalism. Just like the cities and sites. There are some great cities and sites. Atur, which is the home of the stronghold Blood of Vol, which is the center of the production of undead. Massive catacombs and a city underground, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Fort of Bones, which looks exactly like Minas Morgul. If you look at the art for Minas Morgul, it looks very much like that with these big, strong stanchions coming out. It looks very much like that. And the Fortress of Bone is this like fortress such as this dot the hilltops of Karnak, watching for signs of enemy encroachment ever since the last war. Fort Bone's garrisons consist of undead soldiers. No lights glow here as the undead rely on dark vision.
How terrifying is that? Right?
Yeah, it's like
you put a torch up and you're like, turn that light out, and there's suddenly just a volley of arrows out of the darkness just coming straight for you because you need the light and you can't see anything. Just like
fun. Some other great ones as well, like Carcaluton, which is the turbulent Siri River, separate city from the deathly moorlands. It's the birthplace of the kings, and it's also the House Denith of his home there.
Yes.
And it has this place called the Sentinel Tower, which you could just imagine this really cool stern edifice of angular stones, radiates martial authority, and is one of the most heavily defended fortresses. Surrounding the tower are training grounds, barracks, smithies, and it's like you can just imagine this sort of like, it's not the capital, but it's like you just come across this city where it's just marching people and just the sound of, and you're just like, oh, let's just keep walking. Let's just keep going.
Let's not worry about
go there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like you said, the House Denith is this idea of warns and protects. That's the mark of the Sentinel there. Yeah, absolutely. And just to say, because I know we didn't mention it, so Ciri, that's where House Cannith, and that's what we talked about last time, was that maybe one of the reasons is because they found something and unfortunately their experiments went completely wrong. So it is quite nice, again, like each house that, each country does have these dragon houses linked to it, but again, it's always like oh, if you want to check out more, here's the thing. So yeah, Denith is in Carlacton in Carnoth.
I've got some very strong names. This place: Korth, Carlacton, Atur. It's really harsh words. The capital is a fortress as well. It's very much as you'd expect. Yeah. And then it's near this place called the Nightwood, which is a massive forest. It's close ties to Plain of Mabar, which I can't remember what that is.
I wonder if that's like one of the planes of existence in like.
It has its own planes, yeah.
I think that's I think that's the different planes that the dragons run.
I don't know which plane it is.
The book currently, also, I don't think he explained all the different planes, and maybe we don't need them for this book.
Yeah, the Exploring Eberron supposedly does do all of them.
Yeah,
but
that's what I wonder if that's what it is that that's a particular plane on one of the planes that the dragons made before Eberron. So yeah.
But I like it says that criminals and fugitives who flee into the Nightwood find the dangers within deadlier than any Carnathi executioner. Yeah,
it is like a literally like a last resort desperation. You're going, really? Well, we won't see them again, so. Ooh.
And the aftermath of the war is very much as it is. We've already talked about how much of it's like it's been sort of scarred by this in it. Well, however you want to look at it, it's got this religious overflow of the undead, so it's still got them about.
Yeah,
it is a military nation, and it has this even stricter set of rules because it's got privation to do with the like managing, what's it called, rationing and stuff like that. So it's
the Code of Caius, it's called.
Yes, it just kind of explains really. What it is. There's this other interesting one. It says it was one of the architects of the Treaty of Thronehold, and King Caius remains committed to peace. However, many of the nation's warlords believe that Carnoth could have won the last war, and that Caius denied the people their rightful destiny. So should these warlords gain sufficient support, they could push for a military coup. So that's kind of another thing that you could play on as an
unpopular leader who orchestrated the peace, even though that's not what they wanted. There's this attitude that we could have won, but you held us back. And exactly. I feel like this Carnoth is a more miserable place because there's a police state still rationing and there's still a strict it's worse than Breland, so that's what I think. Again, we can just play on all these different things about like how the war has impacted and how it has affected each of these other ones, because it's like you said, this is a martial place with undead with a lack of magic, so it feels like they've been almost left behind compared to other countries who have taken on the magic and like you said, like Order, it's every day for them. Can you imagine, like, if you'd come from Carnoth to Order and you're like, it's so extravagant, it's so, like, the frivolousness of it, but they can use magic and you can't, or you never learned how to, So it's very interesting. Let's talk about the last one, Thrain. So Thrain is interesting. I really like Thrain. This, for me, feels like as a GM. As someone, as I said before, I not really explored the roles of faith and religion in D&D, just because there's all these different pantheons, obviously, and most of the worlds I think you can take it in and out of. But as we're sort of hinting to, faith in Eberron does play a large role, and particularly in Thrain, whose major religion is the Silver Flame. So just to say, the capital is a place called Flamekeep. The hallmarks are divine magic, fine crafts, fruit, livestock, the Silver Flame, textiles, and wool. And most of the people follow this faith. During the last war, people of faith chose to set aside the rule of monarchy and embrace the leadership of the church. That's wild. Like the fact that the religion is the forefront compared to a monarchy or a government or anything like that. You would be able to tell the difference if you hopped over from Brelan to Thrain. You could definitely be like, oh, this is different. You can definitely feel it.
Yeah.
In the last 70 years, as we were saying, so Thrain was a theocracy, but the current head of the state is an 11-year-old called Jalen Daran. I would put 11-year-olds in charge of anything, but it's okay because they're obviously a chosen vassal of the Silver Flame.
It's like Dalai Lama.
Exactly.
So the embodiment of their like keeper of the flame, and so divinely selected. And it's an interesting religion. They are the anti-Vecna, is how I've seen them.
Yeah.
Because their goal is to eradicate evil from not only the world, but from the whole universe, which is the only way to destroy the book of vile deeds. So they're on it. And
they know their purpose. Yeah.
there was a really interesting saying that it said in the Silver Flame thing, which was that it may not be the first god, but it will definitely be the last, because it has a respect for all the other gods, and it respects that it wasn't like the hosts, which were born from the world being brought into life from like existence, but it is the god that will be the last, because it will be the one where it defeats all evil and brings peace to the world. And so it's kind of really, it was a kind of interesting word on it.
Great way of putting it, yeah.
But their idea of evil can sometimes not be great. So
what?
Surprise, surprise! Because the church has always had a militant aspect, and the battalions of Templars and peasants militias prepare to fight undead, lycanthropes, and any other monstrous threats.
Yeah, supernatural evil, I think, is the umbrella term that they're using.
Yeah, exactly.
Their primary purpose is to defend the innocent from supernatural evil, which I feel that's such a woolly statement, because obviously, you know, oh no, Granny's come back as a zombie, but she's okay. You know, like, no, Granny's going back. Put her back in the coffin, you know. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's just interesting. I think again you can work into however you want that to work. But it's interesting because it says they have a compassionate charity, because they will go and defend the innocent. And even in the last war, but during the last war, if a fiendish threat arose in another nation, they would go and ally with the locals to end that threat. So there is, you know, that dichotomy of religion, of its compassion to some and its uncompassion to others, which is kind of classic of all religions.
Yeah, it's like, love thy neighbour, but not the undead ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so love that neighbour, but not that one. It's that kind of thing.
Pick and
so
choose.
There's a bit of that going on.
Yeah, going on to like you saying, like the characters, like frame characters, like, so obviously as we sort of mentioned, the impact of faith. That's a big question here. And again, I think if you were playing a character from Frayne, or you were starting there, obviously knowing about the Silver Flame, absolutely, but knowing about they're obviously, again, they're sort of not enemies, but they're sort of in opposition to, not only have you got the sovereign host, which obviously is the big major religion, but, you know, thinking about the Dark Six and the Blood of Vol, this sort of nebulous, like, sort of bit back and forth, because the Dark Vol, you wouldn't, that is your direct opposition to that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it talks about, like, church or crown. Like, maybe you are playing a character who doesn't like where you're going with this, and, like, feels like we need to move back to some sort of monarchy or some other kind of government. So, like, you as a character from this, what do you actually think about it? So again, tying those characters back into, like, this history, because it is kind of important to that point of view, especially of what happened after the last war. And then finally, it's dealing with darkness. The shadow in the flame can tempt even the most virtuous soul. How do you react when you encounter greed and corruption? So what that comes from, and I'm going to do a very basic, how the Silver Flame came about, was that the leader, there was a fiend that had been unleashed in Thrain, that had proper, like, started to really, again, there's this whole, we talked about it last week, there's sort of this idea of fiends taking over these overlords and then being contained again. And the leader of Thrain sacrificed herself to, with the Silver Flame, to bind this creature, this fiend. So now she is an embodiment, or there's like a huge big flame pillar in the middle of Thrain that contains the thing and is sort of a representation of the silver flame. But within it, the fiend is still there and still tempts people. So this idea that it is like a beacon of like light and goodness, etc. But there's always a temptation, and you have to resist it. I just thought that was really, really interesting. That it's not all good per se. That this is a prison. You could go and visit it and pay pilgrimage and stuff like that. But actually, there is a darkness. Yeah, the darkness within the flame, the shadow within the flame. I just thought it was just an interesting story.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. I like that, and it's very it's very Warhammery as well.
Yeah.
Sort of like there's inside the magic, this and that. There's someone always tempting you. So it's a very interesting place. The cities aren't as exciting, maybe. I don't know. As in, you talked about that. I don't
think so. Yeah.
Pillar of Fire, but that's Flame Keep, and it's a Matches Force city, and they've got this beautiful picture, which is like someone started with Notre Dame and just gone for it, sort of thing. And then you've got the Jewel of Sound, which is Shadowcar. The coastal city was destroyed, so you're just like, it's yet to be reclaimed. So it's said to be haunted both by ghosts and undead forces. So it could be an interesting place to go. Yeah, and then there's Thalios, which we talked about in Arendair, which was taken by them, but is still ceded to Thrain under this treaty.
Yeah, there's still this occupation going on.
There's a bit of occupation. So there's a bit of something going on between that. And so it's up to you if you want to bring that in, but it's got there's a lot of people there who don't want to be part of Thrain.
No.
It's probably too close to home at the moment as well.
Absolutely.
But so ignoring that, there's not too much more given to it.
Out of all of them, I think Thrain obviously is focusing on that religious aspect, and you don't want to take away from that too much. I think that's what it feels like to me. So that's why there's not been too much on those other cities. But again, maybe an excuse would be like, well, you can put your own spin on things. And like I said, I think the only thing I would like, just because we've read so many different planes stuff in the travel book club, is having like, here are the 3 cities, cities that you would have heard of. Here's the last leader known, and what their opinion is, and what that if you went, I want to go to there, is a local guide. That's the only thing I would say. But I will say there's so much in his book already. I can totally understand why they're like, we're not going to include that. You can make that up yourself.
And I think even with the Thalios, you could, if you wanted to take out, you could even say that it's just an area of land which had no people in it that they've just taken. Which if you wanted to have some sort of conflict still with Aendar, so they've just taken this like mining area or something like that.
Maybe it's full of dragon shards or something like that. It's all about money rather than people. Yes, resources, absolutely.
Which could be much more which could be a different way of playing that, or just they just don't like each other because they fought each other. It could be as simple as that, and don't need to have the actual taking of land.
Yeah.
And then the aftermath pretty much says what we've already said. You know, they got this thing with Aendair and the war magic that did create a blasted wasteland between the 2 nations, which we've already talked about in Aendair. It's got obviously the silver flame, which has emboldened them and given them faith. You've got that which then builds this tension between them and Karnath because of their use of undead soldiers. And then obviously there's still this, do you want the monarchy or do you want the theocracy? Or none? Like, it doesn't even say, what about none?
Could you imagine that? Yeah, suddenly there is like another, like a coup or something. Actually, there are more protests, and like they're trying to separate this as church from state sort of idea as well. And then that could be another thing. So again, all these different tensions that aren't necessarily like conflict within other nations, but like conflict, could be conflict with other nations, but actually also internally as well. I think from those 5 nations, we have so much to go on, and I hope that our Whistle Stop tour, as always, has interest people to go and look at it. Because I will say that there are so many other little nations and stuff like that. Like I can do a quick shout out to Lazar Principality, so that if you want to do ships, if you want to go like on the high seas, go over there. That sounds really fun.
I even like Thronehold, interesting place, because it's like an island nation where it's like the UN, but it's like the UN, but it's also like super Cold War sort of time, UN making deals and stuff like that. So if you want to go down that route, that could be really interesting. Yeah, that's on my list. Or if you want to go dwarfy, Mournholds as well.
We've got Shadow Marches, we've got the Tulata Plains as well. So that's that cowboy / settling stuff, which again could be, you just be careful with that sort of stuff. You just don't want to, do any stereotyping there. But like going back to what you said right at the beginning, there's so many different countries and nations, which shouldn't be a surprise. But all of them, you can go, I could start an Eberron campaign and never leave this country.
100%.
Like, you might call it Eberron in name, but it's not. It doesn't feel like the pulp adventure sort of thing. Like I can imagine, like Khorvaire, for example, that has ideas of like treasure hunting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel so different than going to Order or Brellan.
Yeah.
So. Honestly, I would highly recommend checking it out and seeing.
And not even mentioning Sharn.
And not even mentioning the distant lands. We've ran out of time to even talk about the distant lands as well. Maybe again we might have to come back and talk about them. So it's just one continent, 17 nations. We covered 5 of them. There's so much to it. So it's
a lot.
I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we looked at them because I feel like it gets me excited to be like it feels like a proper picture.
It's amazing that we've talked for over an hour and only just scrape the surface of 5 of these nations, and I think that is a testament to like the amount of work that's clearly like been put and thought into this place, and it is that proper sandbox. And I really, if you find the sort of idea of it interesting, at least, I really do recommend just going further into reading some of those other ones, because they don't actually take as long as it takes us to talk about them. So I think it's definitely worth just having a quick skim through that chapter 2 and seeing all these other places. If you're like, I like the idea of Eberron, but I'm not sure about this war thing. Well, here you go. Millions of other places that you can go to and not even interact with it.
Yeah, and equally as well, we're obviously looking at the 5th edition, Rising of the Last War, but if you want to go back and look at the 4th edition, 3.5, 3 edition of Eberron, of course there'll be ideas there. Some of the ideas that probably didn't make it to 5th edition. You were talking about the Exploring Eberron, which is the latest thing that Keith Baker has done, which expands even more stuff. So again, we are just literally scratching the top of the dermis of Eberron. I hope people are excited by it.
Yes.
There's some bits that we've disagreed with, absolutely. But that's always a good sign of a good critique. But overall, I've gone, this actually gets me excited. And it's not as overwhelming as I thought it would be. Like, it's like, oh God, 7 nations. But actually, as you said, I know the difference between them. Sometimes we get to a guild and I'm like, I don't know what guild this is. Or dragonmarked houses. I know there's like 12 of them.
Yeah.
I know the difference between them. I know they're easily like signposted and signaled, and so. Yeah,
it's lovely, isn't it, to find something like when we read Ravnica, we got really excited about it again. Yes. And it's like, these are actually good, these other settings. And I hope there's something, I'm really hoping there's something new for the next edition.
Yeah, I hope there's a setting that gets us excited. That is something like this, that there's a lot for everyone. Because I can imagine that people go, actually, Eberron's not for me, and that's okay. But I think the structure and the wealth of stuff in it, there should be something for everyone. You could take something and change it completely. I think that's
100%.
Well, Hamilton, thank you so much for joining me on this Eberron journey of politics, faith, undead, the usuals. As always, where can we find you? Any upcoming projects you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. You can find me doing my Warhammer stuff on the Fueled by Chaos YouTube channel. I've just done a load of more Necromunda stuff, and I've got another Kit Bash coming out tomorrow, hopefully, so long as I can get little things done on that. And they've got this new setting coming out, so I've done a little lore dive into that, and that's then made me go, there was this great big campaign, which I did a very short thing on. I'm going to do a bigger thing on it. And just when I started writing it, Arbiter Ian came out and said, I'm going to do the whole 3 books in 40 minutes. And I'm like, well, that's great, because I'm going to do one of the books in 40 minutes if I'm lucky, because it's just become this, like, it's a really great story. And I've been trying to write this script for a while now. And so hopefully that'll be next week. So, so that's what I'm doing. And as I showed you earlier, my books, my Kickstarter book, test prints have come back, and just got a little bit of editing to do still on it. But I'm very happy with how they've come out. Very excited. Paper looks good. I need to get thicker covers, so it's kind of good to do this, because you're like, 300 sounds good enough, and you're like, nah, it needs to be like 350, blah, blah, blah.
Nice.
But it's a chunky boy. It's a chunky book. Look at that.
It's great. Good job.
So that's it. What about, where about, when about yourself?
What? Hello, my name is Fiona. I share her pronouns. What? I'm a human being. Where? A cornfield in Iowa somewhere. It's hello. Where? I'm so glad you asked. I run What Am I Rolling, which is a twice monthly tabletop RPG one-shot podcast where we do lots of different RPG systems. We've got a few solo games coming out. We've got some interviews with game designers. And obviously, part of this, I do the Too Long I Didn't Read Tabletop RPGs, which is just a weekly stream, a couple of streams a week. We look at an RPG and go, what we like about it, what can we improve about it, and anything in terms of accessibility, because it's kind of important. I keep asking for pronunciation guides. Nobody listens to me. But yeah, and you can find those wherever you listen to podcasts or watch streams, I think. So
Please do listen. The world building one I have been really enjoying. It's very chill.
Aww.
It's very interesting. And it's just like it's been a really good little series that I've really enjoyed. So I recommend that to people out there.
That's very kind of you.
I tell you the truth.
Yeah, but your other stuff is rubbish.
Yeah, all the other ones. But anyway, there's not much else to say, is there?
No, other than see you on the flip side. Bye.
Bye.